program for prayer and self-denial. And I want to welcome you. We're so excited about this. I've been so excited about this, talking to everyone about it, so I can't wait. I just ask God, if you pray with me. God, Father God, be with us this evening. Give us good ears for listening. Let us learn, and you guide us in what you want us to do in our little missions that we can do around our community. And bless Michele tonight as she speaks to us. Guide her, give her comfort. Thank you, Lord. In Jesus' blessed name we pray. Amen. Amen. And now Beth Merritt is going to do a devotion for us.
Good evening. This devotion was written by Tim Earhart. He's an ordained minister who's serving as the chaplain resident at St. Luke's Medical Center in Milwaukee. In his book, The Hidden Life of Trees, veteran forester Peter Woolben has written a fascinating account of what he learned about trees. Book, The Hidden Life of Trees, veteran forester Peter Woolben has written a fascinating account of what he learned about trees. The Hidden Life of Trees, veteran forester Peter. Okay. Trees are social. They communicate with and care for each other. Trees planted by streams of water are not a group of individual trees. Rather, through their extensive root system in the ground, they share vital nutrients with each other. When one of them's sick, send something to akin to electrical impulses with one another to warn of danger and take ownership of helping the entire forest grow together in health and strength. They're not in a hurry. Their slow growth is deliberate and careful, a testament to their resilience and longevity. Woolben describes this intricate care and communication system as the wood wide web. As we move through this season of Lent, we're not alone. We don't attempt to shed the old nature by ourselves through sheer willpower. We assist one another. We depend upon the Holy Spirit through the Word of God. We embrace the slow, patient, and deliberate work of soulcraft as we anticipate meeting Jesus. And now I will introduce our Vice President, Mary Suttles, and she's going to introduce our speaker.
Well, as she said, I'm Mary Suttles. Michele Wallace is my oldest daughter of two, and I'm just going to not say much about her because she's going to tell everyone all about herself and her mission and what she does during her regular job also. So I'll turn it over to Michele. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. There's so many people interested, which is so exciting to me. I've never talked to anybody like a big crowd like this. I've just shown my family the pictures, and they're like, okay, another picture. So this is so much fun. We're going to start from the beginning. I grew up here at Mount Moriah as a member. I remember being an acolyte at the chapel with Stan and going up and lighting the candles, and Pastor Katrin was the, chaplain at the time. And so my church family, as well as, sorry, I got a little choked up thinking about this, but the memories. My church family, as well as my family, really raised me to that it's part of your responsibility as a Christian to spread the love and share the love that Jesus gives to all of us. And I just remember being young and just thinking that, that's just what we do, right? And it's just a part of who we are. And I remember being young and thinking, I'd really like to work for the Peace Corps sometime. Then I realized, how far away you go, how long you're gone, and then, of course, you meet people along the way in your life and decide you want a family and the whole thing, so all that changes. But in my heart, that was always just still there, always wanting to spread the love and share the love that Jesus has shared with us. And so always had this wanting to go and do mission work. Along the way, I became a nurse, and I'm an advanced practice nurse, and so I work in Indianapolis, Indiana. And so I thought, what a better way to do that than to go on a medical mission and really, share my knowledge and share what I've learned with people who are in need. So it just so happened I was in my community playing mahjong with a group of ladies, and my friend always goes on this mission trip, and she's like, oh my gosh, it's time to go, and she's talking about it. I'm like, where do you go? What do you do? And she was explaining it. I said, I want to do that. So she's like, okay. So she gave me the pamphlet, and then the next year we planned a trip together. And so every time we've been roommates on the boat, and this trip in July will be the first time I'll be going without her, which will be fun and interesting all at the same time. But this is the boat that we ride on. The name of the mission trip is CBM. It's Central Brazil Missions. We go on the boat, and we just live on the boat for 10 days, and we go village to village on the Amazon River. And so what I'd like to share with you tonight is just the beginning of CBM mission and how it all started, as well as talk to you a little bit about the people, which are just amazing, and then the environment that they live in, which is so different than our own, things that we respect in that environment, things that we love in that environment, and then just kind of go through with you a little bit of the work that we do. So we've got just a lot of pictures to share with you tonight, and a couple stories along the way about the people and what I've seen and what we do. So if you can move on to the next slide. So the CBM founders are Earl and Ruth Ann Hobner. They are both in their 80s. Earl still attends most of the mission trips, and they do about 12 to 15 mission trips in a year. They started this mission, they went to Brazil in 1969. Earl had gone to Cincinnati Bible College at the time, and they got a calling to take their church and their mission work to Brazil. And so they ended up having all 4 children and starting a big mission, a big chapel, a big church system there. One of the ministers that he was working with said, there's a huge need to go out to the villages on the Amazon River. So he prayed about it, and they got a boat for free. And so they said, let's give it a try. And so in 2007 was their first trip. And out on the back table, there's a picture of their original boat, which is much, much smaller than this boat. And so they just grew and grew and grew. All 4 of their children are very involved in the mission at this time. His son has his pilot's license, so he flies goods and people back and forth and in and out. They actually have bought property, and they harvest different foods from the property to keep the mission trip going, and to also help spread the mission work throughout the villages on the Amazon. And so it was funny, on my very first trip, I was actually sitting in the corner. That's a picture of he and Ruth Ann, and they're sitting in the front of the boat in the corner. And you often sit in the front of the boat as it's going down the Amazon, and the breeze is just hitting you, and you see all this amazing scenery. And I was talking to him, and I was asking him about how it started. And he told me that he grew up in Georgetown, Ohio. And I went, oh, really? And he said, yeah. And here I am with a gentleman in the middle of the Amazon River, and he's telling me about Georgetown. And then he says, yeah, and then I went to the Bible seminary. When I did that, I worked at Bethel, Ohio, at a gas station. And my father's family is all from Bethel, Ohio. So then I was talking to Ruth Ann, and she's like, yeah, my brother-in-law was a fireman in the fire department there, and my uncle was as well. And so it was just amazing, the coincidence. And then at that time that's where you're supposed to be. You're like, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And so then it just grew from there. So Earl's the interpreter for me. So he's at 83, I think. So there's some things that you have to say, some female patients, that he doesn't always feel comfortable saying it. So I'm like, okay, you got to interpret this for me. And he was, really? Yeah. So it's kind of funny when he sits next to me, and maybe I put him into some situations that make him feel uncomfortable also, maybe. But go ahead and go to the next slide. But Earl and Ruth Ann are amazing people. Ruth Ann is infirmed at this time. She lives with her daughter. So she's in poor health, but he still comes on about half the trips. The crew that we have all live there in Brazil. And they stay, the gentlemen stay on the boat, and they keep track of the boat when we're not out on trips. The women clean the boat. They cook all of our meals, which are amazing. They clean our rooms. They wash our laundry for us. And so it's just so amazing to have such grateful people there helping us the whole time. We couldn't do it without the crew. They're just absolutely amazing. And they all speak Portuguese. And so, of course, we all speak English. So it's fun trying to figure each other out and what we're both saying. But we all get along just fine. Next slide, please. So this is the helm of the boat. Sonderly is the captain. He's the gentleman in the middle with the glasses and the beard. And then Earl's in the yellow T-shirt. And then Junior's gentleman in the back. But Sonderly's the boat captain, and he makes sure everything runs smoothly, and everybody does exactly what Sonderly says, even though you can't understand what he's saying. So, but he makes it very clear this is what needs to happen. But those three are the brains of the operation, and make sure we all stay safe and make sure we stay on track and we go to the right village. Next slide, please. So where are we in Brazil? So as you can see, Brazil's huge, right? And little blue dot is where Manaus is. So we fly into Manaus. It's about a 9-hour flight. Once we get there, we get all of our luggage. We have 2 baggages that are filled with medications and or supplies. And then we have our own carry-on, which has our clothes in it. We don't bring very many clothes because they wash them for us, and we live very, very minimally. And so we take our 2 suitcases and load them and then unload them and put them on the big boat. And then we have to sort through all the medications and all the supplies and get them separated into the hull of the boat, which is where we keep everything. But we start off in Manaus, which is up there at the top, right, on the Amazon River. Next slide. And then we go, as you can see the picture on the left, I believe, with the green, with the blue dot. We start off just right outside of Manaus on the Amazon River, and then we head down the Amazon and out to the ocean. There's two river systems that run in the Amazon. There's the river system that you see, which is the Amazon, and then there's another whole river system that is underground. So, and they both empty out into the ocean. So when you get off and you're on the river and you're feeling it, there's so much energy and there's so much movement and motion. And you just feel the water's continuously flowing, and you can just feel the energy, and you can feel it with so much. It just is all around you, and it's so exciting because there's so much greenery and so much life, and you just feel the energy. And when he told us that the 2 rivers, and the river that's underground actually is bigger and larger than the Amazon that flows into the ocean, which is amazing. So, and then the second picture over is a more detailed picture of where we go. So we go into all the little tributaries, and we go into all the villages all along the way. It takes us about a day to get out of Manaus and into our first stop is always San Sebastian, which is a smaller village. And we get any supplies that they have there. They have a greenhouse there, so all of our food comes from there. They have chicken coop, and they have a huge garden, so we get all fresh vegetables that we eat then off for the next week and a half, and we get the chickens, and they clean the chickens right there. It's all very basic and all very natural. There's no Kroger's. You don't get to go pick it up. It's all very fresh. But while we're driving for that 24 hours, we sort through all the Tylenol bottles, and we put them in like packs of 60. We sort through all the vitamins. So we give these to all the families that we go see. And so we give them little packs of things as we go through. But that's just the second picture, just going into the tributaries. Next slide. So the people. The people is why I go. They are so amazing. It is extremely humbling for me to go on this trip, and it fills my cup every time I go. The people are so grateful for everything, and they have everything in their mind. They have everything they need. And so you come and you give the kids toys, you give them balloons. They go to the dentist. We have 2 dentist offices on the boat, and we have the provider office, and then we have a pharmacy. And so, they come and we talk to them and we hug them and we look at them and we pull teeth and we fill cavities and they're come out smiling and they're happy. And, we paint their fingernails and do all these fun things with them, and they're just so grateful. And it's not like that here. Everybody wants more, and everybody wants something different, and it's never enough. And there, it's everything, and it's perfect, and it's good for them, and they love it. And it just reminds you it just kind of brings you back to human nature and how as people we really are. So the little girl in the picture she was a real ham. She would pose different pictures, and she was very animated. And the little boy, I was trying to get him to smile, and he was not having it at all. But he's a cutie. Next slide, please. So lots and lots of children there. As you can imagine, there's no birth control. So, it's nothing like going into Kroger's and buying 6 boxes of condoms and walking out, and people are looking at you like, whoa, what are you doing? Like, well, see. Lots and lots of children there. And these guys were really cute, looking out the window. And when we get to a village, they all run to come and see us. They're all so excited to see us. Next slide. So they have a lot of artwork in some of the, San Sebastian, one of the little bit bigger city. They have a lot of artwork that they do. They like bright colors, and they're very into their natural heritage. Next slide. So this is one of the villages that we came up to, and this was actually a really nice little town. They had all the buildings painted, and all the kids, had clothes on, which was really good to see. And typically those types of towns, you could see the electric wire as well. Some of the towns have electricity run by a generator, so usually from 7 to 9 o'clock at night, or 7 to 8, they'll run a generator for an hour or two, and then that's it. So the generator, they watch television, and they get on their phones. So they have phones, which is odd, right? But they power up their Wi-Fi and get on their phones for that hour or two, connect with people, or watch television, and then there's no more electric for the rest of the night. And we're on the equator, so it's 12 hours dark, 12 hours light. Period. That's it. There's no daylight savings time or anything like that. It's just 12 and 12. And so we had to bargain one time. We had a 10-gallon gas tank, and we all wanted Wi-Fi because we wanted to connect with our families and let them know we were okay. It had been a few days, because once you get way out, you can't connect with anybody. So we were asking the boat captain, Sonderly, we're like, we need Wi-Fi. And he's like, okay. So he got his 10-gallon gas tank and gas can and gave it up to the village and said, okay, can we give you gas for Wi-Fi? And they're like, yes. And so we traded gas for Wi-Fi, which was hilarious. But this is just some of the kids. Next slide, please. So their daily life is very natural. They take a bath in the Amazon. They wash their clothes in the Amazon. They drink their water out of the Amazon. They fish out of the Amazon. Many, many, many parts of their life revolves around the water. Their little children, anywhere from, they say around 5 and below, will get scooped up by jaguars if you leave them alone. So you really have to keep track of the little kids. They'll just run out of the forest and grab them. So it's very much a conscious awareness of your environment. You're very respectful of what's happening around you, and at the same time enjoying it. So you just very alert. Next slide. So this is one of the villages that we stopped at. As you can see, this is this was actually a well-manicured village. The forest, when you walk up to the forest, they are just solid, like you can't see through it at all. It is just completely blocked with trees and vines and growth, where this is a beautiful home where they have to, some of them have weed eaters that they're gas powered, and which is fun to see, but most of them just use a machete to cut down grass and do things like that. So next slide. They have a rainy season and a dry season. It's pretty much the same temperature all the time. It's just the humidity increases and decreases. So when you have the rainy season, your stalls where you keep your cows or your pigs or whatever get flooded, so you have to let them out, and they just free range and roam all around. And then during the dry season, then some of those villages we can't even get to because it's just so dry. So we go to those areas first in the springtime. Make sure we get to them. Next slide. This was a little village that we had. This was the dishwashing station. They used styrofoam coolers as their refrigerators. So, you think, oh, styrofoam coolers, wow, that's a thing in the past, or even now, kind of, but that's their refrigeration system. So anything that you have has to either be sun-dried and or kept cold enough to stay in a styrofoam cooler. And then they have little bottles, and that was their dishwashing station. So they collect rainwater and then just do their dishes right there. Yeah, next slide. Soccer is their primary sport. They love soccer. As you can see, some of them do not have shoes on, and they're all out. They're full force. They're in it. This was a tournament, and none of them wear shin guards. And they're flipping and doing all kinds of things. The goal had no net on it, so when you kick it, anybody in the way gets knocked with the ball. But they're amazing soccer players. And a lot of times we'll bring soccer balls and pass them out to the villages as well. But soccer's their big sport. Next slide. As I said, all their animals are, mostly anyway, they're all free range and they roam all around. So their feces are all over the ground, and the folks there don't typically wear shoes. If they do, it's flip-flops. So that's how they contract worms. And so every time they come on a boat, we deworm everybody. And many of the illnesses that I see are caused from worms. So, but as you can see, that's just a free-range type of thought process there. Next slide. This was a guy that we were sitting on our boat. We were waiting to leave. And as you could see in this picture, so this was his home. He and his family lived on this boat. And he's got a pot next to him that's tied to a string. So that's what he dips in the Amazon and gets his water. That's how he gets his water. You can see the cutting board. So that's how he scales his fish. And then you could see the little sponge and the soap at the side there. And that's how he cleans everything. So it's just, that's his home. And then he's got the black tarp that covers to keep the sun out from time to time. So next slide. Their nutrition. So this is what they call sawdust. So this is from nuts from a tree, and they cook it. So there's a huge fire under that, in that pit there that he has, and he just stirs it around and roasts these seeds, these nuts, and then they grind them up in a little conveyor belt with just rocks and break it up, and it's what they put on their salad. It's what they put on pretty much everything. And we had sawdust at every meal. And it was really good, actually. So, but they said, we're going to go to a sawdust factory. We're like, yay. So, here you probably go like, what, a sawdust factory? We're all excited, but yeah. So next slide, please. So this was a gentleman that fished for a living. So those are all his fishing nets. I thought it was very interesting. And then he has all of his containers that he puts his fish in. He just had big, huge stacks of styrofoam coolers that he kept all his fish in, and he would take them to market and sell them. He would take them to Manaus, and I'll show you a picture of Manaus as we get going here. But these are all of his nets. He hangs them in his home. So this is his home, as well as where he stores everything. And he had a really, really nice home. As you could see, it's all wood, and he's got, everything real nicely hung. But this is how he keeps track of all of his nets, and he, repairs all the nets when they have holes in them. And this is how he does it. Next slide. So transportation for them, all is on the water. So this is a cargo boat. There are hedgies hanging in the middle. Hedgies are hammocks. It's their word for hammocks. And so they all sleep in hammocks. And they're all hanging in the middle section and on the bottom. And if you want to go from outside village, you take a very small boat, and then you take that into San Sebastian, which is a little bit bigger town, and then you catch one of these big boats, and you're gone for probably about a week or two, and you're going to go sell all your supplies and all your things that you created in your small town, and you're going to go sell it in Manaus. And so, or you're going to go buy things. And so very much like you would think back in the Wild Wild West when you would make things and do things and then take it to town, sell it, buy things, bring it back home again. That's very much their lifestyle. So these big boats are all over the Amazon transporting people back and forth with all their goods. Next slide. These are the small boats they use all the time. These boats are everywhere. They have little tiny outboard motors on them. And they take the family. I've seen 12 people in one of these boats before. But these are the little skiffs that they just run around in, and it takes them and it takes typically about a day or two to get from one location to the next, depending on how far out you live. So you could be on this boat for hours at a time. Next slide. So what you see is, you see beauty all around you, right? I mean, all these pictures are gorgeous, and at the same time, you really get to see how real their life is. So the picture on the right is, I don't know if you could see it really well, there's a solar dish on top of the boat, which to me was, wow, they had really moved up. And then there's a water container as well to catch rainwater. And then we were at a village for about 2 days, and the gentleman in the picture at the end of his boat, he lives on that boat, and he would have parties every night. So people would just come on his boat, party, and then when the sun went down, then everybody went back home again. But on the back of his boat is a shower head, so there's a shower head that hangs over, so he takes a shower there. He fishes off of the back of his boat, and he cleans his dishes off the back of his boat. So everything happens at the back of the boat. We made sure not to watch at certain times, but but next slide. So this is in San Sebastian. Another mode of transportation are motorcycles. So when you're in some of the smaller, villages, they do have bigger villages, I should say. They have motorcycles, and there's no stop signs or stoplights. It's a muddy street, and so they just go anywhere that they want to go. They want to turn, they turn, and so you really have to pay attention where you're going, or else you'll get hit. But so that was a motorcycle repair shop, which I thought was interesting. These are their schools. So schools they do have schools in all the villages. Some of the villages have elementary, and then another village, maybe a half hour away, has the middle school or high school. And so they are government funded, the schools are. And so you get more money as a village if you have a school. So many villages will have a school just to get more money, which they can buy wires and then have Wi-Fi. So that's the goal, right? It is. They're like, we have Wi-Fi. You're like, yes. Next slide. And this is the school bus. So all the kids get on the school bus, and the school bus driver in the back, who is often the teacher as well, takes all the kids from one village to the next if they're elementary or high school. And then at a certain age, the high school goes to about middle school. And then if you want to go further into what we consider high school, you have to actually move to Manaus, the main city there. And so you have to have family there or relatives there. So in order for you to get any higher education, you have to leave your family at the age of 14, 15, and go live with other people in order to get high school education. But this is one of the school buses. Next slide. This is one of the little classrooms that they have, and then you could see how they catch the rainwater there on the side as well. Next slide. So their housing. This was in one of the bigger villages that we saw there, so it was Laundry Day. But the houses that are in the little bit bigger village are closer together. And there's usually about 20, 30 homes that are really close together like that, and they're one-room buildings, and they all sleep in hammocks. Next slide. Other houses look very much like this. So these houses are made for when the water comes in and goes high, or when it's down and there's a drought. So this is I would say this is about 75% of what the homes look like, this picture. And the one on the left there is actually a really large home compared to most of them. Most of them are just one rooms where they sleep there, and then they roll up their hammocks, and that's where they eat and do everything else in there. Next slide. The wildlife is really fun. So this is a praying mantis, and on the back he had two big, beautiful spots. But he stood there for me while I took the picture, and I thought, well, if you're going to stand there, I'm going to take it because you're just really cool. And he's huge. He was probably about, 12 inches? Next slide. These are alligator skulls that they found. And then the small one's alligator, the big one's a crocodile. And they said they find these all over, the edge of the Amazon all the time. And so it impressed me. I took a picture. So you definitely have a respect for the environment that you're in. It's beautiful. The people are loving. The people want to talk to you, and they, that you have, I found, I didn't realize it, but I have a space around me. I didn't realize I did, but they don't. And so they just come up and hug you, and they talk to you, and they're right in your face, and you're like, I didn't realize I had a space, but I have space. I didn't realize I had this. So quickly you get over that, and you learn to get rid of that, and you get back in the States again, and you get your space back again. But you learn that with the people, and you can get so wrapped up in how they are and what they love and what they're doing, and at the same time, you have to keep your eyes open, and you have to keep aware of what's going on around you. So next slide. So this is a giant termite. Pods, these are everywhere, and those are huge. That was about 5 foot tall, and they are large termites, very large termites. So we did not touch it. We just took a picture and kept walking. But that they said the termites can level a forest in just a matter of months, which is amazing. Next slide. They do have snakes, and we're very aware of those. I have not seen an anaconda. I've kept my eyes open for them because I'd like to get a picture. I don't want to get near one. But this is probably, I think we have only seen 2 or 3 snakes, and so this was one of them we saw. Next slide. So what do our days look like? So we start off with daily devotions. So we're at the top of the boat. The very top of the boat has like a covering over it, and we have hedgies up there, or the hammocks that are strung across, and so you can sleep there at night if you want, or take an afternoon nap, which is always nice. But in the mornings, we start off with devotions, often with singing. I've got some of the song sheets back there if you want to take a look at them. And then Earl will lead us in kind of a English-Portuguese lesson. So he'll have the English-speaking people say Portuguese words, and he'll have the Portuguese people say English words. And so my very first trip, he was my translator. And so, at the beginning of every time somebody comes in, and the whole family comes and sits down. So you're in this tiny little room, and they all sit down, and there's like 6 of them. There's a baby, and the mom's nursing the baby in the middle of it, and there's a grandma there, and there's teenagers there, and they all talk about all their problems because they all live in one room together. So they all know all their problems, right? There's no HIPAA. There's no, a waiver that you sign to pass information from one person to the next, So the 17-year-old will just drop his drawers and say, hey, can you look at this? What's going on? And grandma's like, yeah, what's going on? And you're like, okay. So, but I just we're in this, and there's no space, right? They don't care where space is. You're like, whoa. And there's no gloves like we do now. You put your gloves on, all this. No, that's not. So anyway, so I'm in the room. You get used to this after a day or two. So it's probably like our 3rd or 4th day. I'm kind of getting the hang of it. At the beginning of each time a family comes in, Earl translates in Portuguese that he's going to give them, that they're here to see the doctor, and they're going to get some worming medicine. And so I was feeling all spunky. Earl had to go do something else, and there was one gentleman. He was the town leader, and he was by himself. And I thought, I can do this. I can tell him that he's going to, tell me what's wrong and that he's going to get, worming medicine. So I say it in Portuguese, what I thought was Portuguese anyway. And so then he's like, okay, shaking his head, and we figure out what he needs. And so I write down what he needs from the pharmacy, and so he goes on his way. We hug and, He goes out the boat on his way. The next morning at devotions, I'm sitting there, and Earl said, does anybody have any words they need translated? Everybody's like, no, I don't think so. Everybody's like, no. And he's like, because Michele might. And he goes on to tell everybody that I told the gentleman that he was going to be bit by a snake. And so the word worming and the word snake evidently are pretty close. So I was like, and he didn't tell me. He chose to tell me in devotions that that's what. So he's like, make sure you know what you're saying. And we're like, yeah, all right, fine. So, but yeah, so he teaches the Portuguese, the crew, how to say English words, and then teaches us as well how to speak Portuguese. So it's always a lot of fun. Next slide. So these are our living quarters. So on the left is the bunk room that I just had a year ago. And so I'm typically on the top bunk. There are air conditioners in every room, thank goodness. They work about 90% of the time, which is really good. We're thankful for that. And then on the right is the bathroom. So you walk in, there's a sink and a toilet, and then the shower is where the little pink fluffy thing there is. So when you turn on the shower, everything gets wet. The toilet gets wet, the sink gets wet. So you learn real quick to put your clothes someplace else. You don't put them on the toilet seat, which is what I did the very first day. So, and then there's a drain in the very corner down by where the sink is. So the water just drains all the way down into the little tiny hole that goes out into the Amazon. And the water that you're bathing with is Amazon water, right? So it goes into the hull of the boat, and so sometimes it's warm, sometimes it's not, depending on how long it's been sitting in the hull of the boat, and then in the water tank. But you don't open your mouth when you take a shower, nor do you brush your teeth with that water you use. They have water filter, and so you have to have a 2-liter bottle of a 2-liter Pepsi bottle with water in it that goes through the filtration system that you use to brush your teeth. So we had one lady last May. She didn't take a bath the whole 10 days. She was so afraid of the water, so she just used the wipes, all the time. And actually, she did good. I was impressed. I mean, she didn't stink or anything. We were all her daughter was with her. She's like, Mom, you're stinking. And we're like, no, we can't smell her. It's okay. She was afraid of the water, though. Yeah. Next slide. So this is to go from one level to the next level, this is what you have to go through. So there's 3 levels, and actually 4 if you count the hall. And so you learn to carry your plate of food up to the top with one hand and hold on with the other as you climb up the steps, or if you're carrying supplies up and down. So you get a lot of steps in that 2-week period of time. Next slide. So this is typically what we eat. So this is all from San Sebastian, the town that we stop at, and get all the fresh produce, all the rice, all the chicken, and they feed us very, very well. There's always beans and rice. You can count on that every time. Oftentimes they'll have noodles, chicken. They prepare chicken so many different ways. It's amazing. But we are very well fed there. And then they have the best desserts. So they're such good cooks. But the kitchen's all in on the boat, and then we all have kitchen duty. So, you and another person will clean up and wash everything at the end, and then the crew comes and eats after we do. So, next slide. So this is the kitchen table. So off to the left is where the little serving area was that you just saw, and then there's 2 refrigerators in there, but we all sit at the table, and it's very tight, close quarters. But we all enjoy it, and we all have a good time. We laugh. We also play Uno there every night. So it's Brazilians against the Americans. So we all have flags, and whoever wins gets to wave the flag. The Brazilians cheat all the time, just saying. But so there's a lot of fun at that table. We have a lot of good times. And this is also where we count all the Tylenol and all the vitamins. So this table gets used a lot. Next slide. We oftentimes carry our food up to the very, very top deck. And as you can see all the beautiful scenery at the same time that you're eating, which is amazing. We often get to see dolphins and birds and all kinds of things as we're eating. So sitting up on the top is a true treat. Next slide. Oftentimes the villagers will feed us. which is a real treat. So this was one village that we came on, and they're like, come and eat, we've prepared everything for you. And we walked up, and it was just beautiful and amazing, and they had gone to so much trouble to feed us, and they are so grateful. I just can't say enough about how the gratefulness of their people. I did learn this last trip in May, make sure you eat things that are cooked. I came back with food poisoning for the first time. I ended up in the emergency room with IVs and all that good stuff. But I got so excited. It's like, oh my gosh, all this cool food. Next slide. So this is at San Sebastian. This is the gardens that I'm talking about, and this goes on forever. But they grow all their own food, and then that's what we have then during the 2 weeks. They have a big, huge chicken coop there as well, and fruit trees. Next slide. I thought the pineapple plant was really cool. I'd never seen an actual pineapple plant before, but they just slice off the pineapple and bring it on the boat, and that's what we have for dessert. Next slide. So what does our day look like? I don't know if you could see these numbers. On the very first column is the name of the town that we go to. I should have made this bigger. The next column are the number of people that we see. So you can see, like, one day we saw 638 people. The next day we saw 130 or 80 people. The next day was 180. So typically we see around 900 to 1,000 people in the week and a half, 2 weeks that we're there. So just lots and lots of people. They just keep coming through. Next slide. And there's two dentist offices on the boat, 2 dentist chairs on the boat as well. So this is what the families come, this is what they look like when they come to the village. So we pull up to the village, and it's all dirt, and we have a little gangplank that we attach to the side of the dirt. And then the villagers just come from all over different villages from around the area. The missionaries who live locally tell them when we're coming, and then they have it scheduled exactly, and they all know when they're coming, and then they sound the horn, and then they get in their small boats, and they may live, half hour, 15 minutes away. Some of them that live a day's ride will stay in the village that we're coming to and just stay with people that live in the village to be seen. To see a doctor, it takes roughly about a day to get to a village, maybe even 2 days, depending on how far out you live. And then once you get to that village where the doctor is, there's no guarantee you're going to see the doctor. You may stand in line all day long and not see the doctor, and then you got to spend another night in that village away from home before you can see the doctor. So there's no guarantee. There's no first come. It's just first come, first serve. So they come, and oftentimes it's been a year since they've seen anybody or anybody's seen them. So they come from all over. They dress in their best clothes. The kids are all clean. Nobody comes dirty. Everybody's all cleaned up. They have their best clothes on. Their hair is all perfect. It's amazing the respect that they have for the work that you're doing. Next slide. So they leave all their flip-flops at the front of the boat, and then they walk barefoot on the boat. It keeps the boat clean. The Sonderly, the boat captain, is very particular about his boat. He has 2 big Mitsubishi engines down there in the engine room that are spotless. His hall, everything in the basement is just, in the hall is just squeaky clean, and he doesn't want any dirt on his floors in the boat. And so they all leave their flip-flops. And flip-flops are what they wear all the time. That's the shoe all the time. There were guys out there with weed eaters with flip-flops on. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're going to come on the boat. I know they are. They're going to. They don't. They just continue to work. And when they go in the forest and they hunt and they cut down trees, and that's when they wear their boots. But just around the village, they wear flip-flops all the time. Next slide. So they come and they fill out a little registration form that has their name on it. We keep track of all of them. They've got them for, I think it's been 50 years now that they have been doing the missions in Brazil, and they've been doing the boats for 20 years now. So they have these cards for every person that's been on the boat before. So from the little guys, you can see that they grow up, and you can see how often that they've been there. And we take their height, their weight. You can go to the next slide. Height, weight, blood pressure, and any other, like temperature. We get their temperature, And so oftentimes when they have high blood pressure, then it's like I'm able to tell them, you need to go see a doctor. You need to get this taken care of. And so, of course, it's not the next day. It could be within that year sometime that they go see the doctor. But oftentimes we go to the same villages, and so I see the same people again the next year, which is always really fun. And I ask them, did you go to the doctor and get blood pressure medicine? And they'll be like, yeah, or like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. So, next slide. So once they come and get all the height, weight, and get their temperature and blood pressure, then they wait in this long hallway. This is on the first level of the boat to see the doctor, and then or go see the dentist. Next slide. And then once they come and see the doctor, so this is what it looks like in the doctor's room, very small. There's 6 to 8 chairs, and then they're all in there with you. The doctor that's pictured here, she, CBM, the mission, put her through medical school in Brazil. And so they paid for her to go to medical school. And then in return, she does 6 months on the boat for them, works on the boat, and then does 6 months, has her own practice in Manaus as well. So, next slide. So that was, I was supposed to be sitting in that blue chair there, but I was taking the picture. And the little girl, as you can see, she's got her hair all up, and she looks so pretty. And Earl's waiting for me impatiently to go sit down. He's like, stop taking pictures, come over here. So, next slide. So this is the dentist chair. It's a very small room, just enough to have a little tiny chair in. And they do mainly extractions. They will do some filling the cavities. What the dentists tell me, which is really interesting, a lot of times they'll have Brazilian dentists come, and they'll have American dentists as well, whoever can make the trip. And they said that Brazil didn't, at least in the villages, didn't have sugar, like candy, until probably the last 8 years. And we also bring them candy on all the trips because the kids love it. And they said what they're seeing is they're seeing the teeth rotting from the outside in versus like America, we have decay at the root and going out. So it's like the reverse, but it's because they don't have toothbrushes and toothpaste. And we give them toothbrushes and toothpaste and soap, but to have it, the whole year, they don't have it. And so, or nor do they understand the importance of it. So just very interesting, that education level. Next slide. So that's me, and then the little girl in the middle, and our names are all Michele. And so the little one in the middle is Michele. We had a hard time getting her to smile. The kids just don't smile for pictures. And then the dentist is Michele as well. So the dentist and I were talking, and I was seeing a lot of cataracts on very young people, like 20-year-olds. And it was confusing to me. And then she was saying that with being right on the equator, and a lot of fishermen, and especially if they work next to the water, the reflection of the light on the water gets in their eyes, and so it's a protective thing that their eyes do, and they build a cataract over their eye. So about 50% of the people there become blind just due to the cataracts. And so you can have the cataracts removed, but they grow again. And so oftentimes we bring many, many sunglasses and pass out sunglasses to the little kids and then to the adults as well. So sunglasses are really, really important for these folks. But yeah, so Michele and I were talking, and the dentist, Michele, she didn't know. She was like, oh my gosh, we just need sunglasses? Is that all we need? And so when we got to a place where we could get Wi-Fi, and I was looking it up, and I was like, oh, this is what it is. And she's like, we never knew. And it was just eye-opening how simple some things could be prevention. Next slide. So these are some of the little guys with the glasses on, and the kids love to get their pictures taken with the glasses because they look so cool, so it's always a lot of fun. The little guy in the blue, he was 9 years old, and he was waiting to go. He had been on a surgical list. So first I'll start with, to have surgery in Brazil, you have to go on a waiting list. And so, and the surgery is in Manaus. That's the main where everything is. And so it takes, again, about a day to get there on the big boat. And so we had one of our cooks had a 15-pound fibroid tumor in her uterus. And so she was on the waiting list to have surgery, to have a hysterectomy. And when you're on the waiting list, it could take up to a year for your name to come up. Once they call you or notify you that your name's close, then you have to go to Manaus, and you have to wait there until your name is actually at the top of the list. So you could be there for a week or two, living with someone, and it's expensive to rent out a place. But she and her friend went, and they were able to find a place. They had a friend that they could stay at for a week. So her name came up on the list, and it was time for her to have her surgery. And she was like 4'10" and weighed like 100 pounds. So this was 15 pounds of her. And so they went to surgery, and her friend's sitting in the surgical waiting room waiting for, the surgery. The surgeon comes out. He's got his, surgery, garb on and his hat on and his boots and everything, and his gloves were off. But he said, "Did you bring the bucket?" And her friend said, "Bucket? What are you talking about?" She said, "Yeah, I need to have someplace to put the uterus." And she's like, "I didn't bring the bucket." And so he said, "Well, there's a hardware store, and everybody always forgets the bucket. So just go down to the hardware store." And Angie and I were talking, you can just run down to Lowe's, pick up the bucket, and then come back, and then, we'll give it to you. We'll give you the uterus. And so she's like, "Okay." So she goes to the hardware store, comes back with a bucket, gives the bucket to the surgeon. He walks in, puts the uterus in the bucket, brings it out to her, sets it down next to her in the waiting room. And so, meanwhile, she's like, "What do I do with this bucket? It's my friend's uterus." So, and in the Brazilian hospitals, the family takes care of you. So the nurses are there, but they're only there to do medications and treatments. So your bed linens, cleaning you up, giving you a bath, any food you eat is all done by your family. So if you make your family mad and you get sick, yeah, so that's one reason why they're so humble and so nice to everybody, I think, is because they know that if you're not nice, nobody's going to take care of you. So so she took care of her friend, Meanwhile, the uterus is still back at their friend's spot 'cause she's not sure what to do with her friend's uterus, right? So then, meanwhile, her friend gets discharged, goes back to the apartment in Manaus, and then so she's like, what should we do with this? And she said, "Well, I want to take it back to our village, and I want to bury it in my backyard." She's like, "All right." So they take the uterus with them in the bucket on the day ride boat trip back to the village, and she buried it in the backyard. And 2 days later, the dog dug it up. So that was one of the funny stories that we had. So, I'm not sure where it is. I'm sure people just throw the body parts in the Amazon. I'm sure that's where they put them. But they don't dispose of biohazard waste in the hospital. So that's the problem. And this little guy, he's in the blue, he's 9, and he needed a circumcision. And so he kept getting urinary tract infections. And so they were asking me, "Hey, Michele, can you do a circumcision?" I'm like, "No, I can't do a circumcision." But he was on that waiting list for surgery, and so he couldn't go to school or do anything because he had to be on this boat for his name to get called on the list. So he'd been with his mom on the boat for 6 months. The next week after, there was a surgeon coming from Mayo Clinic, and so they were going to rent out a little surgery suite at the San Sebastian, the small little village that has one surgery. And they don't do general anesthesia, they can only do spinals. So if you're having any surgery where they can numb you from here down, so they were doing hernia repairs, then they could do surgery, but they didn't have any gas or any other medications they could give you, only spinals. So he was coming in the next week to do hernia repairs, and so I said, "He can do the circumcision." And so they were like, "Oh my gosh, we didn't even think about that." So then he was able to have a circumcision the next week then, and then he could stop having urinary tract infections. But he had him continuously since he was little, all because he couldn't clean himself properly. So it's the simple things. It's just the simple things with them that really make so many difficult health conditions. We had one gentleman, this was impressed me to no end. He had broken his arm straight across when he was 10 years old. And he was in his mid-20s, so about 15 years had gone by. And they didn't set it, didn't do anything with it. And the bone was still broken. So there was about this much gap between that bone and this bone. And it was just skin. It was all tendons and skin. And so he could fling it in a circle. And he thought it was the funniest thing in the world. And he would fling it around and around and around. And I said, "Do you get it caught in things?" Because he worked in the forest. And I said, "Do you get it caught? Does it get in your way? Because you got this thing flinging all around." And he's like, "Yeah." And so I said, "Have you thought about having it, cut off?" And he's like, No. He said, "The women love it." And I'm like, okay. Well, that's one reason to have it then. And then, he, and I said, but are you afraid of it getting caught in something like a, axe and when you're cutting and moving things? And he said, yeah. So we fashioned a sling for him so he was working in the forest, then he could keep it close to his body and it wasn't doing its own thing. And plus it was an image thing for him as well. Like he didn't want to lose his arm. It was a masculine image thing for him. So, and then the women loved it. So yeah, I thought, why not keep it at that point? You've had it for 15 years, might as well. So, next slide. So these are some of the funny glasses. He just thought that was the funniest thing. He said he asked if we could take his picture, and he was super excited about that. Next slide. So we bring a lot of readers on the trip as well. So as we get older, we have a harder time seeing. So if you're a fisherman and you can't see to bait your hook, it's really hard to fish. If you're a female and you're sewing and you can't thread your needle, very, very hard. So we pass out a lot of readers, and they're so excited for the gift to see. And it's amazing, we take it for granted. You go to CVS and pick up 3 readers, you lose them in 3 weeks, and then you go get some more, and where they hang on to them. It's their life for them. It's what matters. So such little things. And so we have the eye chart, and we're like, can you see? Yes, no? And they're like, oh my gosh. And then before you know it, everybody's coming on to get readers on the boat. So next slide. That's the hallway. So once they leave the doctor's office, then they sit in these chairs. And with how I said it, they would get bit by a snake. Or actually, they get worming medicine is what actually happens. And the little kids just chew it. It's Chica. And so the pharmacy is a little bit further down the hall, and then we give the adults like a care package of like shampoo, soap, toothbrush, toothpaste, things like that. Next slide. That's our pharmacy. It's not very big. Vicks is the #1 drug. Prescribe it to everybody. Put it on the bottoms of the kids' feet. They call it Vicky. And so Vicks is the drug of choice, and they use it for everything. So we go through tons and tons of Vicks. Vicks Vapor Rub. Yeah, or the generic, whatever we have. And then infant drops, Tylenol, infant vitamins, prenatal vitamins. We had one little baby this last time in May who was a failure to thrive. She was 8 months old, but she was I think she was 15 pounds, just so tiny, and had diarrhea continuously. So we really had to work hard to get her some sustenance and nutrition. So we have baby bottles and formula and stuff like that. And most of them, of course, nurse. But if mom's not able to well, they run into problems. And there's a lot of education that goes with that they're just not aware of. So next slide. And then the kids get like a little toy, and then she had a sucker. And so she was one that was crying all the way through. But at the end, then she was happy and able to leave. Next slide. So while we're busy seeing people and getting through the dentist and the doctor and doing all these things, they're busy on the land then singing and telling stories. So they tell Bible stories and sing songs with the kids. Next slide. We pass out soccer balls, and the kids play soccer all the time with us. So oftentimes people come on the trip that aren't healthcare workers. They'll go out in the village and play soccer with them and have a good time. Next slide. Paint their fingernails. They think that's the best thing in the world. Many of them have never had that before, so they think it's the coolest thing in the world. Next slide. We had one lady on a trip who brought all these balloons. She could make balloon animals, and so she just was busy making balloon animals for everybody, which was a lot of fun. Next slide. We do haircuts. So there was one trip I asked the barber, he's not a barber, he is actually a mechanic. And I said, Chris, have you noticed these little white things in their hair? He said, yeah. I said, yeah, that's lice. And he's like, oh. He said, well, I've been using the trimmers on everybody. I said, I kind of figured you were. Yeah. Let's not do that anymore. So in this village. So we had to, clean the clippers. But but we'll do haircuts for them as well. There's nowhere else to go, right? I mean, Next slide. So one trip I was on, we were able to do baptism in the village. So we baptized 6 people, which was really a blessing to see. Seeing people baptized in the Amazon River is just a whole new experience, I can tell you. So it was really cool. Next slide. A lot of the villages have churches, and so they're very simple, very basic, and they would invite us in for a church service oftentimes. Next slide. And so this is what the inside of the church looks like. Very basic, simple. The windows are all open, no air conditioning or any fans typically in the villages. So the air movement is just the air from the, off the river itself. Next slide. The whole village came to the service that we had, which was really fun. Next slide. So at the end of the trip, we all go to Manaus, which is where our flight comes in on. And you can't see it really well here, but there are people sleeping on the pier. And these other homeless folks, or just people that live in Manaus, we're not sure. But they are all just asleep on the pier as we pulled in. Next slide. So this is where the boats come to sell all the fish that they catch. They sell all the fruit that they have, anything that they have to sell. This is where they bring it. And so those are all fishing boats. And so when you walk up on it, you'll see just hundreds of fish in the front of their boat. Next slide. It's quite a smell because it's been outside for a couple days by the time they get there. And then this is their electrical system in Manaus, which I found very interesting, and I'm just really surprised anybody's alive and the whole place hasn't burnt down. But you could tell, I don't even know how they problem solve how to fix that, but I don't know, it just was very impressive. Next slide. And so at the Manaus market, they sell a lot of nuts and all the berries and fruit and everything, and this is how they make their money and how they buy things that they need. Next slide. So this is the open fish market, and as you could tell, it's just huge. Hundreds and hundreds of fish, pork, chicken, lots of smells in this place, lots of smells, and lots of noises too. People are trying to sell their fish, so they're all trying to, coax you in to come buy their fish. Next slide. There's their hospital, local hospital. It has about 10 beds. Most people do not go to the hospital for care. Most people get their care at home, if at all possible, unless you have to have a hysterectomy. Then you need to go. Next slide. At the end of the trip, the crew does a Brazilian steak cook-off for us. So they cook steaks and chicken, and it's just amazing. But they're so grateful for our work there that they want to serve us. And so they cook all this food, and then they put it on a plate, and then they walk to us and serve us and give us all the food, which is we're so thankful for that. Next slide. So this is one of the sunsets that we had. It's such a beautiful place. And next slide. Any questions? It is anywhere from 70 to 100. What is the temperature there? And it's anywhere from 70 to 100. When it's 70, the humidity could be 98, which is worse than if it's 100 and the humidity is at 70. Yeah. And have I delivered any babies? No, thank goodness. I am not a baby person, so that would be push. I don't know. Push, I think. I don't know. Other questions? Yeah.
How many in your group?
We typically have about 12 to 16 that go at a time. Bluff Creek Christian Church is a group that I go with in Indiana, and they go every other year, so I go with them. And then this trip in July, I'll be going with Total Strangers. So there's usually about 12 to 16 in a group at a time. Yes?
What do they use the bits for on their feet?
It gets rid of the grippy, the cold, common cold. So same thing we do. Yeah, exactly. I know. Yeah. On their feet, they say. Yeah. The moms swear, the elderly women are like, yes, that's exactly what you do. I'm not going to question it. I've heard it as well. Yeah. Other questions? Well, thank you all so much. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You sure can. Yeah, absolutely. Sunglasses and Vicks would be lovely. Yeah. If that's what you walk away with, that would be really cool.
Just go to the dollar store and you can get
Yeah.
the cutest little children's sunglasses.
Yep.
I gave her a big box of them for Christmas one year, a couple years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. It is amazing. It's the simple things, isn't it? Yeah, you come back a very humble person and very thankful. Very humble and very thankful. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, shot clock. Wow. That's amazing. That's a lot. Okay, thank you. Yeah, sure will. Yeah. Oh, thank you. That's a great, I think they just pass them down. And they don't wear those clothes all the time because we've asked those questions. Like their clothes aren't normally that nice, but they wear the special clothes when they come and see the doctor. Yeah, it's like their Sunday clothes. Yeah. Yeah.
So if they have to wait for surgery, if a woman is needing a C-section or someone has a hot appendix, what happens?
Yeah, so the question is, do they need a C-section or are they hot appendix? Probably the hot appendix would die, my guess. And then the C-section, that's a tough one. Hopefully you've got somebody in the village who can help you out with that. I know I had a patient that came up one time. Her husband brought her. We were at one of the villages. We weren't seeing anybody. We were at one of the San Sebastian. We were picking up supplies, and he said she's having chest pain. Can you help her? And so, I took her pulse, and it was very irregular, and she was just having crushing chest pain. She didn't look good at all. Blood pressure was awful. And I was like, we really need to get her someplace. It was a day boat ride for him to get her anywhere. And he said, I'm going to go to Manaus in a week. Can I take her then? And I said, well, you can. Yes. It might be too late by then. But, yeah. No, I tried to impress upon him the urgency and how quickly she needed to be seen, but he didn't have the money to do it then. No, he was going with a friend, in a week. And so you're just, unfortunately, a victim of your environment at that point. Yeah. Yeah. She said besides worms, I'd say infections. Yeah, infection is the most. Viral diseases are also probably really highly up there, like respiratory diseases. So we take a lot of antibiotics with us, amoxicillin especially, and we ran out of amoxicillin elixir for the kids. So we ended up having to pull, capsules apart and making an elixir for a 2-year-old that had it was an awful case of tonsillitis, to where she was having a hard time breathing even. So. We didn't have the elixir, but we were able to make some up with capsules just to try to get her something down her throat. Yeah. Other questions? Thank you all so much. This has been fun. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. It was so informative, so great. And I'll just have a quick closing prayer. God, thank you for Michele and the work that she does serving the people of the Amazon River Basin. And thank you for the new order in which the first are last and the last are first. Turn us away from the false values of the world, that we may pursue your priorities, that which makes you happy, steadfast love, justice, and righteousness. Amen. And thank you all for coming out tonight. And I guess you already had told everybody about the collection baskets that are already out there. Yeah, there's one for children's Tylenol, products like that. And how long are you going to leave those out there? Are you going to leave those out there for a few days? And then there's another basket for cash donations.
We'll leave the Tylenol basket out there for two or 3 weeks. And there's the basket, our prayer and self-denial offering we normally take during this program. The money will be going to her, and there's a basket, a cash basket out there that she will take with her tonight.
Hey, Mary, that could be made out to Mount Moriah United Methodist Women. The prayer and self-denial.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And I did want to ask you, how many times do you go? Is it once a year when you go down?
It's once a year, so this time in July will be my 6th time going.
Wow, that's great. Okay, well, thank you.